they are also pushed to assimilate. And so what does assimilate mean? A lot of times it means assimilating into white culture, but I think there is this draw and this pull towards Black culture because that was the cool part of American culture that they knew. And the draw, I think, also then gives them like social capital on both sides. Like, I mean, there's probably sociological breakdowns that you could do there, but I
Yeah.
think the initial draw does come from a place of, like I said, an amortization and hopefully respect for a lot of people. Where it gets, you know, muddied along the way is a different story, but I think that's probably where it starts also.
How is it received on the opposite end? Because I think, for, Black culture for sure, like, Asian culture is very much perceived with like gladness, right? It's like we enjoy it, we consume it. Uh, do you know how much it's like, how it is on the opposite end? Like, is it like, how's it viewed like in the Asian
Diaspora.
sphere? Like, how
Hmm.
we, like, us, being embraced, but them also embracing us. Like, I know it's not all bad for sure, and I know there are some positive and negative things when it comes to all of that. But like, I was wondering, your experience, perspective on that, even conversations that you had regarding that.
Yeah, I think broadly, from what I've witnessed being in fandoms and really just trying to study these things and learn them coming from that perspective, I think again, this is when you start going down this road of like Afro-Asian cultural connections, you really start seeing like two things are true at once often. And so
Yeah.
I think there is a draw to our culture. I think there's a respect for the talent that our culture we have culturally. But also, while Black culture is one of the biggest exports from the West, so is racism. So it's often to me this like cognitive dissonance of loving the culture and really thinking it's so cool and like they want to have cornrows and they want to dress urban is what they call it in some countries, and they want all of that, but they've also taken in a lot of this anti-blackness, so they
Mm.
don't want us with that sometimes. And again, this is speaking broadly. Of course, that is not true for every individual. And I would definitely say the younger generations in these countries, like it's less and less true. With conversations I've had, I also think um there is nuance because we do have history of conflict here in America specifically. Like there is hurts that we're going to have to work through at some point. Like we have to be able to do both at the same time, walk and chew gum at the same time, having these conversations like we have done this harm, we need to work towards undoing that harm, but also recognizing like why did we do this harm to each other? Was it because we actually hated each other, or was it because we were pitted against each other? And what does that mean? Um but that's from the conversations and research I've done. Again, it's going to be different for every individual person. And I don't think most people, just like on the other side, like when you think of Black people approaching Asian culture, I don't think, because a lot of times, a lot of conversations are about cultural appropriation, things like that. Like people are, most of the time, in my experience, I would love to not be wrong, are not moving with hate in their heart, right?
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
moving with ignorance in their minds. And that's a different thing.
Got you. Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. I remember a few months ago, I found this video, and it's of a guy. I think he lives in Japan.
Hmm.
And he like kind of talks to different like foreigners, like
Hmm.
Americans, Australians, whatever, just about their experience in Japan and stuff. But there was this one particular video where there were a few guys, like I think in one of the biggest cities. Um, I think it was Tokyo, that there were like dudes with dreadlocks. I'm just like, wow, that's like honestly like that's very cool. Like, and there are some people where it's just like, oh, like like Black people can't, or if you're not Black, you shouldn't wear a lot.
Hmm.
Just like you can do whatever you want. You know what I mean? I'm not, and I think the same as you. I'm hoping that they're not taking the culture and then like I guess also hating the people at the same time. Um,
Hmm.
and like I thought that was like really cool because this was in the context of like hey, like why can't Black people be depicted in anime? Because there are a lot of people, especially within the, probably this is another question I want to ask, in the West, that like kind of gatekeep like the
Hmm.
like that gatekeep Japan or gatekeep anything in the West, and it's just like trying to keep it in this like pure form, I guess.
Ooh,
um
I knew you were gonna say it, and I still hate that. But yes, you're right.
and it's like, and for me, I'm like, that's kind of weird because in my perspective, I'm like, oh, if I see someone that like of a different culture that's wearing like locks or they're wearing like something that is obviously from African American culture, I'm not gonna hound them and be like they're appropriating. I'm like, okay, they're hopefully they're embracing the culture, they're loving the culture, but also loving the people as well. I'm not just gonna write them off, but I think in the I think in the West, like it's just it sucks. It sucks sometimes. So like I guess this is the question. Why is it that at least from what I've seen that a lot of people from the West they just like they ride so hard for Eastern Asian culture and being like, hey, this is what pure blank is. You can't do this. Right. I have tons of friends, right? Like I have tons of friends that are like manga artists and stuff. Great Gail, that's in the comments right now. Like they're black manga artists and like they've been told like, hey, you can't be a manga artist because you're not from Japan. Like that's not real. You're just comic books. And just like, uh so like what is your perspective on that? What's your thoughts on that? Be as raw as possible.
I know, I'm like, there's so much. Oh my gosh, where to start? So I will say, for starters, for me personally, especially going through this project, I've always thought there was nuance as far as the conversation around cultural appropriation coming from my background. And like you asked earlier, like how has my dad affected the way I approach cultures? I'm like, well, there's got to be an exchange, right? And I feel like a lot of how puritanical sometimes the West can be about these lines of like, this is what it is, especially America. And
Mm,
which comes from a place, our very sordid history with race, and the West created the concept of race, so like I understand where it comes from, but like this puritanical approach really discourages exchange and learning and growth and the things that I think are necessary to move forward as a culture. So personally, I've always thought there was nuance, but I did think there's times we need to call it out, but like over the course of like even this project, I've really come to the place where I'm like, context is everything. Like I cannot say, most of the time, I don't think it's for us to say what is cultural appropriation or not
for sure.
from the outside. Like, sometimes it's very obvious. Like, sometimes it is still very obvious. But a lot of times, like, I think of, I don't know if you saw this on TikTok. There was that they went viral and then they deleted they got doxxed. It was a whole thing.
What?
The K-pop group, do you know
Huh.
Strawberry Chan, and I forget what their name was, but like they were cringe, but like, is it a crime to be cringe? Everybody was like, they're culturally appropriating and stuff. And I'm like, the only way to know is to know them because
Yeah.
you can't know their intent. You can't know how authentically they're engaging with the culture,
For sure.
like it can be cultural appropriation, but I can't say it without the context. So why are we bullying these people? We have to hope they have people in their lives that will call them in, especially if they're engaging with another culture. If they really have a Japanese boyfriend, like one of them claimed, like
Yeah.
I would hope that person's calling them in and doing that work with them, and like that's all we can hope. And I've gotten to the place where like I don't think it's for us online to be not calling it out, but really bullying people. Like, I think there's a way to call people in. I think there's a way to bring attention to like, hey, maybe this isn't so cool, but to leave it and let
Yeah.
people learn on their own, because I think it really hinders cultural exchange and what that needs to be. And for anime fans who are often white, but T, who are saying that, oh, Japanese art needs to be in its purest form, blah, 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 blah. First of all, it's coming from white people. Like, I have never heard a Japanese person say this, first and
Yeah.
foremost. Maybe a Japanese person in America, but I've never heard a Japanese person from Japan say this. I think in Japan, from what I understand as a little American girl, so I don't know much, but they really appreciate when people put in the work to really appreciate the art and like really learn the art form. And
Yeah.
so I don't think they care as much. And I think we should all really question, in any fandom, our drive to keep things pure. What does pure mean to you? Why?
Mm,
Why do you have a problem if it looks different than it does now? Why are you so against innovation? I am very much always side eyeing traditionalists, but also the traditionalists in all of us, because I think we all have bits of these things that we learn and pick up. Like, you got to question those things in you. Like, I'm not the most culturally woke and aware person. Like, I stumble all the time, but I've worked hard at unlearning things and really processing things. So, I think the reason why is racism, in short, but I also think that it's misguided if I wanted to approach these people in good faith, because first and foremost, my biggest thing is like there are black people in Japan. I don't know if you know, but there are black people worldwide.
Yeah.
So even if it wasn't coming from outside the house, us calling in and being like, "Hey, we'd like to see black people here because you do borrow from our culture a lot and you do have a huge black fan base. It'd be very cool to see black people." But
Yeah.
also, there are black people in your own country. Like they
Mm.
exist and their stories need to be told too. And I don't think it's wrong, even if it's a point of a percent to have those stories told sometime, you know?
Yeah. Yo, that you just dropped all of these gems that like I love so much. And yet some 15-year-old TikToker, if I was to clip this, they would just be like disagreeing with you about nothing. And so I really appreciate you saying that because like I said it, when I had my season of just being like, hey, there are black people that can do this too, and dating with people and stuff like that, where it's like they're there. I mean,
Mhm.
it's like they and I think for one, if you can take take for example like if we're taking like Samurai Champloo, right? Or we're
Okay.
taking
Yeah.
like even Cowboy Bebop that has
Mhm.
like the jazz influence and stuff. And there are these influences, Afro Samurai, like
Yeah.
these things are there. Why is it such a problem that people from the outside are saying like, hey, can we have more of this? Like this is cool. Like we would love to see this. Like we love this like animation. We love this genre of like of fiction. Can we have more of people looking like us? And like granted, I'm well aware of being like, hey, I can't demand something from I can't demand something from another culture, right?
For
But it's like
sure.
a good amount of us like your culture, and I think I think it's yeah.